Hey everybody, Plushie here. So today I just wanted to make a short video talking about Summer Musashi's most recent buffs. And because I feel like I actually am in the minority where I prefer this buff way over the battery buff that a lot of people actually wanted, I just sort of want to show my part of the argument why I feel that way. And obviously this is all my opinion, so please don't get too heated in the comments, but I will try to reply to every sort of debate, but probably not, immediately because I'm still struggling with jet lag. But yeah, here we go. So first of all, one of the most common arguments I see is that Musashi doesn't need a damage buff. Why would she ever need a damage buff? Because she already has good damage before the MP upgrade. Why not give her a battery instead? Well, I actually kind of disagree with that, and here's why. So as you can see here, this is a snippet of the very beloved servant damage spreadsheet, and this is done by Raten Taiso, a great friend of mine on Discord, and obviously if you watch other FGO tubers, basically everyone uses this at this point. So I don't think he gets enough credit for it, so I'm gonna shout him out right now. But anyways, as you can see here, the top row is Summer Musashi's MP damage post buff, and the middle row is Summer Ibuki, and the bottom row is Summer Musashi pre-buff. So as you can see here, pre-buff Summer Musashi's damage seems to be equal to Summer Ibuki, so that kind of supports the argument of Summer Musashi doesn't need damage. However, this damage is actually considering using all of their skills in a single turn. So this damage is actually counting the defense down on Musashi's third skill, and it's not actually that easy to have this sort of consistent damage. You either have to sacrifice the defense down on the third wave to have better damage overall across the three waves, or vice versa, sacrifice even more damage for the first two waves in order to have maximum damage on the third wave. So Musashi's damage isn't always going to be this good. However, Ibuki has all of her buffs last 3 turns, and none of them are debuffs. So in fact, Ibuki's damage does remain this number across all 3 turns for farming. So Ibuki's damage is actually generally gonna be better than Musashi. And then you take into consideration that Musashi didn't have a niche, and Ibuki has one of the best anti-niches in the game in the form of anti-earth, which is obviously one of the most wide coverages in terms of anti-trade. So Musashi absolutely did have a damage problem, because especially if you're comparing her to Ibuki, because I know everybody and their mom is comparing her to Ibuki, she just doesn't have any form of damage advantage. And obviously, when you take into consideration that their refunds are pretty similar, I think Musashi slightly beats out Ibuki, but once again, it depends on the looping setup. And then, Ibuki has a whopping 50 MP extra battery on top of it. So Ibuki's gonna be more flexible in terms of farming comps as well. So Musashi just had absolutely no advantage, even in terms of damage. But now, post-buff, Musashi does really good damage. So this damage, obviously, as you can see here in the sheet, is just destroying Ibuki. But this is once again counting the 30% defense down. So the disparity is not going to be that big, but even if we remove the 30% defense down, Musashi still well out-damages Summer Ibuki. So at least it's fair when it's traitless, because now the one that has less flexibility in farming actually has more damage. And now, on top of having better base damage, she also obviously got a very strong, albeit more niche, anti-trait, and it's also 200% instead of the standard 150%, giving her one of the highest damage ceilings in the game as long as she's fighting against Saber class servants. So honestly, I like it very much, and I think she very much needed damage boost, both on the niche side as well as the, base damage side. The second most common argument I hear people have against this buff is that anti-Saber class servants is way too narrow of a niche, and it's not worth it. Well, I highly disagree, but I kind of understand where they're coming from, because in this day and age where we're very much spoiled by stuff like anti-earth, anti-sky, anti-man, where they cover basically 1/3 of all servants and even non-servants sometimes, it's gonna seem a little bit lackluster. However, that is kind of the price you have to pay for having a 200% extra damage bonus instead of a standard 150%. Also, basically every 90++'s wave 3 are all servants, so the times when this damage bonus is gonna matter is mostly going to be waves with servants. Also, do remember that this anti-trait is put onto a berserker, which is a class that you're already farming every class with anyways. Don't get too tunnel vision into thinking that, oh, because she has an anti-saber class niche, she can only farm sabers. Once again, we've already demonstrated how her damage trait list is already very impressive and outclassing Summer Ibuki. So I don't really see this as a limiting factor or way too niche. It's almost like an icing on the cake, albeit the icing is extremely huge. And I also think people are severely downplaying the importance in terms of damage for farming. People very much prefer refund over damage. Once again, that is the main argument between having a battery buff or an MP upgrade, and I think in this day and age, damage is almost more important for 90++ farming than refund, because 90++ nodes have been known for having some of the most unreasonable HP levels. Even with Oberon, sometimes you are not able to kill the final wave, so having extra damage is always gonna be welcome. Obviously, I'm not trying to say that refund is important in farming, but there's a lot more ways to play around it nowadays. Most events have 50 MP starting charge on their event CEs, so you don't need that much pressure on your main DPS to have a battery. There's also obviously, multi-core setups where you have a single target take care of one enemy nodes where the AoE would have had trouble refunding on. And finally, there is no shame in using DPSs that can also sacrifice themselves, such as Arash or Hebatrot, to sort of have the best of both worlds, where you don't have to sacrifice any buffer on your main DPS while also having another DPS take care of one of the waves, so you don't have to refund 3 waves in a row. And once again, let's not pretend Musashi can't refund. She just doesn't have a battery. Her base refund is very good. She's one of the OG Arts AoE servants that is able to loop even before the existence of Castoria. People like to say it as if Musashi absolutely cannot refund, when for most stuff she can still absolutely refund, especially if you take into consideration a 50 MP starting chart CE. Okay, Plushie, I'll give it to you. The buff isn't absolutely horrendous, but why do you think it's so broken? Like, I think it's just a pretty standard MP upgrade, no? Well, here's a couple of reasons why. So first of all, I think for a DPS servant, having an MP upgrade is almost the best kind of buff you can have. Obviously, there are rare cases, such as last anniversary Saber Ultra buff, where it's absolutely nuts to the point where I think I'd take that over an MP upgrade. In most cases, I think an MP upgrade is the safest sort of buff that a DPS can have to be useful, because you will never find that extra damage completely worthless. And the second part is obviously the 200% Anti-Saber class SE, and that sort of destroys the Archer class. So you can see here, this is an Excel sheet, and the numbers are copied from Rat's damage sheet. But why did I have to copy it here and make it ugly? Well, because all of the damage on Rat's sheet is neutral, so I multiplied all of the Archer's damage by 2 and Musashi's damage by 1.5, so we can directly compare them. So as you can see here, the blue underline is Musashi's MP damage on a singular saber, and the gray are all of the archers in the entire game. And then we see Musashi's damage, and then we start scrolling down, and then we start scrolling down, and we start scrolling down, and then we start scrolling down, and we slowly realize, wow, Musashi actually does the highest damage out of all of them when she's not even an archer against Saber Servants. And my honest reaction to that information is, what the fuck? I don't think this should ever happen, where a Omni AoE DPS is doing more damage to a single target Saber Servant than a designated single target archer that is built to kill sabers. Now obviously there are still, demerits, like Musashi is a berserker, a pretty fragile one, right? But she is an art servant, so Castoria can very much salvage a big part of that lack of survivability. And once again, FGO is a game that is very much focused in offense, where if you don't let them touch you, you'll never die anyways. So yeah, I don't think it should ever be a thing, but I guess we're only looking at no anti-trade, so let's take a look at the anti-trade side on the archer. Give him a chance, right? So as you can see here, single targets without anti-trade is just, they're not going to beat her. We already see that. The first one that slightly beats her is UDK Barghest in single target mode. And also, she has to trigger the secret buff where she has, only if she has like a low star servant beside her in the front lines. The second one is Orion or Artemis, right? It's again, anti-male single target. And the other one is Chiron, right? A single target, anti-earth. And then we keep scrolling down. It's the same thing with Ashwataman at low HP and Bonnie Marie at 1 HP, barely beats her. And then we see Gilgamesh, right? Gilgamesh was the king of just anti-servants in general. And, you know, when he's hitting Saber servants where it's supposed to be his strongest sort of niche, he loses to Musashi. I guess at least he wins against Berserkers, you know, compared to Musashi. Yay, right? And then we keep scrolling down, like most AoEs with anti-trade, like Napoleon doesn't really beat him at all. David, this 3-star single target with an upgraded MP and anti-trade, slightly beats Musashi. Durga only beats her when she hits double anti-trade in Sky and Demonic, right? Say Shonagon hitting triple trade is almost never gonna happen. But, you know, when stars align, she's gonna beat her. Same thing with Tametomo. Tametomo's condition is the funniest. You need Indomitable Bowmanship activated once, which means he needs to die. Triggers Guts. Mechanical Archery ×2, meaning that he can't use MP for 2 turns to ramp this up. So yeah, he has to be at Waterside, he has to be anti-lawful as well. And all of that combined to finally beat an AoE Berserker. So this is why I think this buff is ridiculous. You can't tell me that, oh, this is only against servants. Well, is that really niche? Every challenge quest is mostly servants, and most 90++ final waves are also servants. That's not niche at all. Once again, a Berserker isn't supposed to do a job better than a class that is designated to counter only one class. It's like having a chainsaw in your Swiss Army knife. I don't understand how that is allowed, and I can't fathom why people think this buff is bad. So finally, I want to talk about why I'm defending this buff so hard. Because I think it's brilliant, and I want to see more of this. Maybe not to this extent. I think it's a little bit overboard, but they managed to carve out a niche for Summer Musashi without actually devaluing Summer Ibuki. So if you just gave her a battery, she's either going to be worse Ibuki or better Ibuki, which either is bad in my opinion. I think buffs should separate servants and make them more distinct instead of trying to make them feel more similar to one another, making the game really boring and no incentive to actually pull for different units. And that is already kind of a thing in FGO because MP levels are so important for 90++ farming that people are more willing to invest in a singular unit than actually trying to pull for multiple. And I don't want that trend to worsen by just having all the servant feel the exact same. So I like this buff. I hope more buffs go this direction. Just once again, not to this extent, because in order to carve out a niche for her against Summer Ibuki, they accidentally sacrificed the entire Archer class in terms of their efficacy against challenge quests, which in my opinion, it's probably too big of a sacrifice. Like at this point, why would I ever use a archer? Like there are obviously reasons to use archers, but you know, I'm not even being that crazy about it. Like if you just bring Summer Musashi with Castoria, I don't think you ever need an archer for boss fights, which is really sad, but they'll do better next time, I'm sure. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'm sorry this is a bit messy because I'm once again plagued by jet lag still, but I just want to get this out because I feel really strongly for this buff, and Musashi, in my opinion, just became one of the scariest DPSs in the entire game. And rip archers.